In this segment, we're going to code some HTML. HTML is designed to mark up your page, basically to show the purpose of the content that you're developing. Now, people often get confused. HTML is just for markup. It is not for design. HTML marks up the content so it can be shown in a multitude of places using design that's optimized for that locale. For example, you may have the same HTML that displays content inside a web browser, but also on a mobile device or maybe as part of a mobile application. So be careful to think of HTML as markup. Now, browsers do have a standard way of displaying HTML, but that may or may not be what you want as a final result. So without further ado, let's code some HTML. I've already opened the brackets text editor, and I'm going to go to File and New. And that gives me a blank file. Now, I'm immediately going to save the file, and I'm going to save it on my desktop just for convenience. And we'll go ahead and call it firstfile.html. Now, when you name HTML files, they should start with a lowercase letter. You can't have any spaces in the file names, and they should end with .html. Now, sometimes you see files ending with .htm. That's okay too, but that goes way back to the days when computers couldn't handle an extension with more than 3 letters. So since everything can handle an extension of just about any amount of letters now, let's go with .html. I'm going to save on my desktop. Now, the reason I'm saving that first is that lets brackets know what language I'm using, and it's going to provide me with color coding and syntax highlighting to make my life easier. So every HTML document starts with what I call the basic document structure. Let me show it to you. So these are tags that I'm writing. And you'll notice as I type the first tag, or what's known as the opening tag, brackets puts in the closing tag for me. A good rule to remember is that every tag that you open in HTML must be closed. Every tag you open must be closed. So there we've got a skeleton document structure. Now, documents are divided into 2 parts, a head and a body. And you may be noticing that I'm indenting as we go. And the reason I do that is to make the document structure obvious. We write code for 2 audiences. We write code for the web browser that's going to interpret our code and display it within the browser. But we also write code for human beings to read, because myself or another human being may have to read and interpret my code, so we want to make sure it's easy to follow. So these indentation standards are a really good idea. So now that I've got this, I need to add some content because nothing would display. So here in the title, between the opening title tag and the closing title tag, I'm going to have my cursor flash. And I'm simply going to title this First Web Page. Now, the title doesn't appear within the browser window. It appears on the browser tab. It's used if the user saves your page as a bookmark. It's saved under this title. And it's also important for search engine indexing. If you want your page to be indexed by Google, Bing, or another search engine, you want to make sure your title accurately reflects the content on the page. So let's put some content on the page. Here in the body, I'm going to use the heading tag, and we're going to make a page about programming languages. So we'll simply call it About Programming Languages. So this heading 1 tag tells the browser that this is the most important heading on the page. Now, browsers have a default way of displaying this, and that's according to what's called their default style sheet. And this text will actually appear big and bold. So now let's put a second piece of information. Programming languages are used to develop software and as a means for programmers to communicate with the computer. All right, so this is in p tags, and these represent paragraphs. So you see an opening p tag and a closing p tag. Now, by the way, I'm only going to have time in this short course to show you a small subset of the actual tags that exist in HTML. If you want to learn all the tags, you need to take another course or find a reference, etc. This is just a subset of the tags so you can see how they work. All right, so now we've got our H1 for our heading, our paragraph tag. So now I'm going to create a list. Now I'm going to create an unordered list. And that's a list that's basically what you and I would call a bulleted list. So first of all, let's give it a title. I'm going to use an H2 tag. That's a less important heading. Some modern languages. All right, so let's create our list. So this is an unordered list. It'll go inside a UL tag. You might be noticing how brackets helps me as I write my tags. Now, our list items will go here between the opening UL tag and the closing UL tag. So let's write some list items. List items go in LI tags. And by the way, if you make a mistake, just delete it and write what you're supposed to. So some modern programming languages. Let's see here. Let's do Ruby. You may have heard of Ruby or Ruby on Rails. Let's add a different one. Python, very popular. I'm sure you've probably heard of Java, which is different from JavaScript. People commonly mix those two up, not the same language or the same function at all. Let's go ahead and add here one more. Let's add Visual Basic. All right, so our closing tag is already there, and we have our list of programming languages. So now we've got some data to actually display in the browser. I want to make sure I save at this point, and we can actually take a look at this in a browser. Got my browser right here. And here is my first file.html. Now, you can usually double-click this and it'll open in the browser, or from the browser itself, you can choose File and Open File and navigate to the individual file. Or you can Control-click or right-click, and if you choose Open With on a Mac, it'll give you a list of browsers. Let me move this over so you can actually see that. We'll move all this out of the way. Open With, and there's a list of applications. We could use Chrome or Opera, which is in here a bunch of times, Safari, etc. All right, so I'm actually just going to open it from Chrome. So I'm going to choose File, Open File, and it's on my desktop, so it's easy to find. And there I can see firstfile.html. I've got another file somewhere on my desktop called first.html. I want to make sure I open the correct one. Double click. And there you can see is the content that we wrote here in brackets. Get this out of the way. So let's take a look at the code and the actual result in the browser at the same time. So you'll note that none of these tags that we wrote are showing, right? This is all designed to communicate with the browser. Now notice here, remember I said the title appears in the tab? Well, there's First Web Page in the tab of the Chrome browser. Our heading 1, About Programming Languages, appears right here, big and bold. And there's our paragraph. Now again, all of this is based on the default style sheet. This is how the browser displays this information by default. We very well could change that through cascading style sheets if we desired to do so. So here's our H2, Some Modern Languages, a header that's less important. Headers, by the way, go all the way up to H6. So you've got H3, H4, and now is our bulleted list of our modern languages. Notice we have our bullets Ruby, Python, Java, JavaScript, Visual Basic. So we have all of these elements right here. So now that we've got all of this together, we can actually see a really neat feature of the brackets environment. So I'm going to make sure I have brackets selected. I'm going to go to File and Live Preview. Now, Live Preview works with Chrome. So here I'm being in brackets, being given the option, in order for Live Preview to connect, Chrome needs to be relaunched with remote debugging enabled. Would you like to relaunch Chrome with and enable remote debugging? Let's choose that option. So Chrome will relaunch. And here's what's neat about this. Let's say I make a change to my code. Watch carefully as I do this. And we'll use the language C++. Now when I save, and I saved using Command S, notice that appears. So let's say we change this from an H2 to an H3. Notice, by the way, when I change that, now this closing tag is in red because our opening tag and our closing tag need to match. I'll save again, watch some modern languages. Notice it got smaller because H3 is smaller on the browser's default style sheet. This lightning bolt here shows me Live Preview is on. I can turn it on and off by toggling this lightning bolt. But this is a neat feature of brackets, again, that works only with Chrome, but it certainly can make it easy to develop, especially if you got a big screen and you can have your code on one side and your content on the other. Let's just demonstrate one more tag. This is a tag from the HTML5, the current version of HTML that's coming out and being implemented right now. And that's the footer tag. Now, you all know what a footer is. Copyright 2013, so when I'm writing this, Learn to Program, Inc. We'll save, and notice my footer appears there at the bottom of the page. I can make this a little smaller so we can see everything. Perfect. So the footer tag does just what you think it does. It allows you to put a footer on your page. So with the footer, however, let's say I wanted to do something just a little bit different. So I'm going to go here in the footer, and I'm going to make this into a link because I want someone who's on this page to be able to click it and go back to my site. So I'm going to use A for anchor, href equals, and then the address. We're at www.learntoprogram.tv. We'll close the quotes and close the anchor. Now I want the closing anchor tag to be here. There we go. So there we've got our closing anchor tag. So let me make this a little bit wider so you can see the whole thing. So now inside our footer tag, we have the anchor tag, href equals, and then learntoprogram.tv. Now this is the text that the user will select to activate the link. This closes the anchor where the link is, and this closes the footer. So now when I save, move this down, notice this turned purple, indicating a link. Let's click it, and we go to learntoprogram.tv. Click the back button on the browser, and there you can see the link. So we've introduced several HTML concepts. We introduced the basic document structure. We introduced the head and the body. We talked about heading tags, H1, H2. We talked about paragraph tags. We created an unordered list, a footer, and we did our first example of a link using A and href.